It was one of those humid summer evenings in Houston, where the air seemed to buzz with invisible tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. The streetlights flickered as if they knew something was coming, something dark and heavy. The kind of night where you lock your doors a little earlier, glance over your shoulder a bit more, and wonder if the world's still spinning the way it should. Officer Madison Blake stood outside the old brick warehouse, the one that had been abandoned for years and always seemed to hum with secrets no one wanted to know. She adjusted the leash on Max, her K9 partner, a German shepherd with sharp eyes and a nose that never missed a thing. Max's ears twitched, his gaze locked on the scene in front of them. A suspect in handcuffs and a uniformed officer, someone she didn't recognize, leading him away toward the waiting patrol car. That's when Max did something he'd never done before. His entire body tensed like a coiled spring. His hackles rose, a low, guttural growl rumbling deep in his chest. And then, before Madison could react, he lunged. Max launched forward, teeth bared, and clamped down hard on the man's forearm. The officer, a tall, broad-shouldered guy with a buzz cut and a name tag that read Officer Carter, stumbled back, cursing, trying to shake Max off. Madison's heart stopped for a second. Max wasn't a dog that made mistakes. He wasn't a dog that lost control. Max! Heel! Madison shouted, her voice cutting through the heavy air. Max let go, panting, his eyes locked on Carter like he'd found the devil himself. Carter swore under his breath, shaking his arm, trying to laugh. Get off. What the hell's wrong with your dog, lady? Madison forced a tight smile, but something inside her twisted. Max wasn't wrong. Max was never wrong. She'd seen him take down armed suspects, sniff out hidden drugs, even pull a child from a burning building. If Max was reacting like this, something was off. As Carter pulled the suspect, who looked pale and too quiet, toward the squad car, Max kept growling under his breath, low and steady like a warning siren. Madison narrowed her eyes, her instincts screaming. Carter's uniform looked perfect. Too perfect. The badge gleamed like it had been polished that morning. His boots didn't have a single scuff mark. And he wasn't wearing the standard issue body cam every patrol officer was required to have. That wasn't normal. None of this was normal. If you love stories about heroic animals like Max and you believe in their power to uncover the truth, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals. Our channel is dedicated to sharing the most incredible, true stories of animal heroes from around the world. Madison tried to shake off the nagging feeling, but it stuck to her like humidity on a Texas night. She watched as Carter shoved the suspect into the back of the squad car a little too roughly, his eyes darting around as if checking for witnesses. Max whimpered, tugging at the leash, his nose twitching toward Carter's side pocket. Madison's breath caught. Was Max picking up something? Drugs? A weapon? Easy, boy, she whispered, kneeling to stroke his fur, but Max's body stayed rigid. The suspect, a man in his early 30s with dark hair and a busted lip, looked at Madison for a brief second, and in that flicker of eye contact she saw it. Fear. Not fear of getting arrested. No, this was something deeper, the kind of fear that makes you stare at the ground and pray no one notices you breathing. Carter slammed the car door and turned toward her, flashing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. We're all good here, Officer Blake. I'll transport him downtown. Madison hesitated. Technically, Carter outranked her. He had the bars of a sergeant on his shoulder, but something wasn't adding up. Which precinct are you out of again? She asked, her tone casual, but her fingers tightening slightly on Max's leash. Carter's smile faltered for a heartbeat, just a flicker almost too quick to catch. Third, he said quickly, already turning away. Max barked once, sharp and loud like a gunshot. Madison felt a chill run down her spine. The third precinct had been closed for renovations 6 months ago. She opened her mouth to say something, but Carter was already getting into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. The squad car's engine roared to life, the taillights casting a red glow onto the cracked pavement. Madison stood frozen, the pieces swirling in her head, not quite clicking into place. Max growled again, low and dangerous, eyes locked on the car as it started to pull away. Then it hit her, Carter's badge, She hadn't seen a nameplate. Just Carter. No first name. No badge number. Her pulse spiked. She turned to Max, gripping his collar tightly. "Good boy," she murmured, heart racing. "I think you just saved us all." But the night wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The squad car's taillights disappeared. Into the dark, the rumble of its engine fading into the humid Houston air. Madison stood frozen on the cracked asphalt, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumline. Max, ever the soldier, sat beside her, muscles tense, eyes locked on the street like a hunter stalking prey. For a long second, it felt like the world had gone still, just the two of them under the flickering streetlight, the buzzing of a distant power line, and the gnawing sense that something was horribly wrong. Madison's radio crackled to life. "Unit 42, status check?" She pressed the button on her shoulder, voice steady but tight. "Unit 42, Blake reporting. We've got a situation. Suspect transport just left the scene. License plate 6T924H7, black and white Crown Vic. Driver claims to be Sergeant Carter from the 3rd Precinct. Request immediate verification." The dispatcher's voice came back confused. "3rd Precinct? That's under renovation. We don't have any units operating out of there." Madison felt her stomach drop. Max let out a low growl, like a motor, revving, and Madison knew, without a doubt, they were chasing a ghost. She didn't wait for backup. "Max, let's roll," she shouted, sprinting toward her cruiser. Max leapt into the passenger seat without hesitation, his tail whipping the dashboard as Madison slammed the gear into drive and peeled out of the parking lot. The streets blurred past in streaks of neon signs and yellowed streetlights. Madison's hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, her mind racing. Who the hell was Carter? And where was he taking that suspect? Max sat alert, ears perked, nose twitching as if he could smell the lies trailing in the wind. They caught a glimpse of the squad car a few blocks ahead, making a sharp right onto an industrial service road near the bayou. Madison's foot hit the gas. The engine roared, tires screeching as they rounded the corner. Her headlights caught the scene for a split second. Carter's car skidding to a stop by an old shipping yard, the suspect tumbling out, stumbling like a drunk, Carter right behind. Him shouting something Madison couldn't make out. And then Carter looked back. Their eyes locked. Madison could see it clear as day, even in the dim light. His face twisted in a mix of rage and panic. That wasn't the face of a cop. That was the face of a man who'd just been caught in the act. "Max, out," Madison shouted as she slammed the brakes, throwing the door open. Max launched from the seat like a missile, paws pounding the pavement, his bark sharp and echoing through the night. Madison drew her weapon, heart racing, adrenaline burning through her veins. Carter spun, pulling something from his waistband, metal glinting in the streetlight. "Gun," Madison yelled, taking cover behind the car door, finger on the trigger. But before she could react, Max was on him. The German Shepherd hit Carter square in the chest, jaws clamping down on the man's arm like a steel trap. Carter screamed, the sound raw and desperate, stumbling back against the hood of the car. The suspect, the man they'd arrested earlier, froze, hands in the air, eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. "Get on the ground. Now!" Madison barked, voice sharp and unyielding. The man dropped like a stone, trembling as Max continued to hold Carter in place, growling, teeth bared. Madison approached cautiously, her gun trained on Carter, heart hammering. "Let him go, Max." The dog released on command, stepping back but keeping a low, warning growl in his throat. Carter's arm was bleeding, badly. His eyes darted around, wild and desperate, like a cornered animal. Madison could see it now, plain as day. The badge was fake, the uniform a perfect replica, but the details, no body cam, no radio mic, no department patch, were missing. "Who the hell are you?" Madison demanded, voice steady but her hands shaking ever so slightly. Carter didn't answer. Instead, he lunged. It was a clumsy last-ditch effort, reaching for something in his back pocket, but Max was faster. The dog surged forward, slamming Carter to the ground with a snarl that shook Madison to her core. As Carter lay pinned, struggling beneath Max's weight, something fell from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. Madison snatched it up, stepping back, as she read the words written in neat, blocky handwriting, Warehouse 72, Bayou District, 2 a.m. Her pulse spiked. What the hell was going on here? She yanked Carter's hands behind his back, cuffing him tight, her breath coming in sharp, fast bursts. The suspect, the man with the busted lip, was still on the ground, staring at her like she was the last hope he had. "Please," he whispered hoarsely. "They're going to kill me." Madison's stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't just a rogue cop. This was bigger, much bigger. She radioed in, her voice steady but urgent. "Dispatch, this is Blake. I have one in custody, false badge, impersonating an officer. I need backup at my location and medical assistance for a K-9 bite. Also, I need a unit to secure a second suspect, possible kidnapping victim. This goes deeper than we thought. Over." Max sat by her side, chest heaving, tongue lolling as he watched Carter with a predator's gaze. Madison knelt down, running a hand over Max's head, whispering low, "Good boy. You knew. You always know." But deep down, a cold realization settled in her chest. If this was just the tip of the iceberg, what the hell was waiting for them at that warehouse at 2 a.m.? The hands on Madison's watch ticked past midnight, and the city of Houston seemed to hold its breath. The warehouse Carter's note pointed to, Warehouse 72, sat on the edge of the Bayou District, tucked between a row of rusted shipping containers and an overgrown lot that smelled of diesel and forgotten secrets. Madison cut the engine a block away, the cruiser's headlights dimming to a soft glow before she killed them completely. The streetlights flickered sporadically, their yellow hue casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. She could feel the weight of the heat, thick and oppressive, clinging to her skin. The air smelled like wet asphalt, oil, and old metal, Houston's signature cocktail. Max shifted beside her, his breathing steady, but his ears were pricked forward, eyes sharp, nostrils flaring like he could already sense something dark waiting for them in the night. Madison gripped the wheel, her mind racing. Backup was en route, but it would take time. Maybe too much time. If what she was walking into was as big as it felt, waiting could mean lives lost. She glanced at Max, who stared at her like he was waiting for her to decide. "Let's do this," she whispered. Stepping out, Madison kept low, moving toward the shadows of the containers. The concrete underfoot was uneven, littered with cigarette butts, bottle caps, and the kind of debris that told stories you didn't want to hear. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive structure with corrugated steel walls and faded numbers barely legible under the flickering light. Madison's heart pounded as she moved closer, her Glock drawn, the weight of it reassuring in her hands. Max moved like a shadow beside her, silent, focused, a coiled spring ready to snap. As they approached the side entrance, Max froze. His body went rigid, tail low, a soft growl rumbling deep in his chest. Madison stopped cold. There were voices, low, tense, the kind of voices that knew they were saying things that could get them killed. She pressed herself against the metal wall, straining to hear. Shipments moving out in 30. Carter was supposed to bring the package. Where the hell is he? A second voice, sharper, more agitated. "I don't care. We'll finish the deal without him if we have to. You know the boss doesn't like delays." Her stomach tightened. This wasn't just a random hideout. This was an organized operation. Max growled again, just a whisper of sound, but Madison felt it vibrate in her bones. They had to move. Sliding along the wall, she reached the corner of a broken window and peered inside. The scene was like something out of a movie, a makeshift command center filled with crates, duffel bags, and weapons laid out like a buffet of chaos. Men in tactical gear were moving around with purpose, counting, cash loading guns, checking phones. One man, tall and lean with a sharp, cruel face, stood near a table covered in maps and documents. He was barking orders, gesturing to the others, and Madison knew in her gut, this was the ringleader. Then she saw him. The suspect from earlier, the one Carter had tried to smuggle out, was tied to a chair in the corner, head slumped forward, a bruise blooming on his cheek. Madison's pulse spiked. This wasn't just about Carter. This was about something much bigger. Max's growl deepened, vibrating like a storm building in his chest. Madison placed a hand on his back, her fingers digging into his fur. "Easy, boy," she whispered. "Not yet." But it was too late. One of the men looked up sharply, his gaze locking onto the window where Madison crouched. "Hey, who's there?" The room exploded into motion. "Go, Max!" Madison didn't hesitate. She swung around the corner, weapon raised. "Police, everyone down, hands where I can see them." Max surged forward like a bullet, straight at the man reaching for a rifle. The dog's bark was sharp and ferocious, a sound that cut through the chaos like a blade. The man barely had time to react before Max hit him full force, jaws clamping onto his forearm, dragging him to the ground in a tangle of limbs and curses. Madison advanced, her voice booming. "On the ground! Now!" A shot rang out. She ducked, instinctively, heart in her throat. But Max was already moving, teeth flashing, dragging another man down before he could raise his weapon. Madison fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The sound was deafening, a crack that echoed through the metal walls like a clap of thunder. "Drop it! Drop the weapons!" she shouted, eyes sweeping the room. The ringleader froze, his hand halfway to a gun tucked in his waistband. His eyes met Madison's, and in that split second she saw it. The calculation, the cold rage, the realization that this plan was falling apart. But before he could make a move, Max lunged, snarling, forcing the man's hands into the air. All right," he shouted, voice cracking. Madison moved fast, cuffing the nearest man, kicking weapons away, keeping her gun trained on the ringleader the entire time. Her adrenaline was a live wire under her skin, but her focus was razor sharp. It wasn't over yet. The tied-up man, Carter's original package, looked up at her, eyes wide with disbelief and relief. "Thank you," he croaked. Madison nodded, keeping her gun steady as sirens wailed in the distance. "Back up finally." Max stood beside her, chest heaving, fur bristled, eyes burning with that fierce, unrelenting loyalty only a dog like him could carry. As the chaos settled and the men were cuffed and dragged out, Madison let out a long, shaky breath, crouching to wrap her arms around Max. "You did good, partner. Real good." Max licked her cheek, tail wagging, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the room as if to say, "We're not done yet." And deep down, Madison knew he was right. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The warehouse buzzed with the sounds of controlled chaos, backup units swarming the scene, radios crackling with updates, the sharp snap of handcuffs clicking shut. Madison watched as officers from the Houston PD hauled out the men one by one, their faces a mix of shock, fear, and fury. The flashing red and blue lights painted the night in a chaotic blur, and for a moment, she let out the breath she'd been holding for what felt like hours. Max sat at her side, tongue lolling, chest still rising and falling with the effort of the chase. But his eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes, never stopped scanning the crowd. Madison ran a hand through, his thick fur grounding herself in the moment, but deep down she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Blake." She turned to see Captain Ray Donovan jogging toward her, his bulk cutting a wide path through the controlled chaos. His uniform was rumpled, tie askew, the kind of look that said he'd been pulled out of bed and into a nightmare. "Captain," she greeted, voice tight, adrenaline still thrumming in her veins. Donovan glanced at Max, who was watching him like a hawk, and gave a small nod of respect before cutting to the chase. "Fill me in. Fast." Madison did, outlining everything: Carter's fake badge, the attempted escape, the location of the warehouse, the weapons, the tied-up suspect, the map with the 2 a.m. meeting time. Donovan listened, his jaw tightening with every detail. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath when she finished. "This is bigger than I thought." Madison nodded. "Sir, it's not just a smuggling ring. These guys are running something big. Guns, maybe drugs, possibly worse, and Carter wasn't working alone. There's someone higher up, someone calling the shots." Donovan rubbed his face. looking 10 years older in the harsh light of the cruisers. "I'll get the feds looped in," he said, voice gruff. "This is organized crime, no doubt. But listen, Blake, this thing is going to get messy. You and Max, you both need to be careful. We don't know how deep this goes yet." Madison nodded, her stomach tightening. She knew. As the scene settled, she spotted the man they'd rescued, the package Carter had been smuggling. He sat on the back bumper of an ambulance, a paramedic dabbing a cut on his temple. Madison approached cautiously, Max at her side. The man looked up, his eyes dark and haunted, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and lived to tell the tale. "You okay?" Madison asked, her tone soft but steady. He swallowed hard, glancing nervously over his shoulder before speaking in a low, urgent whisper. "They're not just moving guns," he said, voice rough, like sandpaper scraping wood. "They're moving people. Kids." Madison felt the ground shift under her feet. "Kids?" she echoed, barely a whisper. The man nodded, his hands trembling in his lap. "They've got them hidden in trucks, shipping containers. They're moving them across state lines. Tonight's shipment, there were supposed to be 3 kids in the next truck out. Carter, he was getting paid to move them." Madison's breath caught in her throat, her heart hammering so loud she thought it might crack her ribs. Max growled low as if he understood every word. Her radio crackled. "All units be advised. Possible lead on additional targets. Reports of suspicious activity near the East End docks. Officers en route." Madison's eyes locked with Donovan's across the lot, and he nodded. Grim. "Go." She didn't need to be told twice. "Come on, Max," she called, already heading for her cruiser. Max leapt in like he'd been waiting for this his whole life. As Madison flipped on the sirens and tore down the road, the city flashing past in streaks of light. She felt it. The storm building. The night air was thick, electric. Like Houston, itself was holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Max sat alert, ears forward, eyes gleaming in the glow of the dashboard lights. He wasn't just a dog. He was her partner. And in that moment, Madison felt like they were the only 2 people who could stop this nightmare from unfolding. "Hang in there, kids," she muttered, voice tight, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We're coming." The East End. Docks loomed ahead. An industrial sprawl of cranes, warehouses, and shipping containers stacked like forgotten toy blocks. Madison killed the siren as they approached, heart hammering. Max let out a low whine, his nose pressed to the window, his body tense. Madison eased the cruiser into a dark corner of the lot, cutting the engine. The docks were mostly deserted at this hour, the only light coming from a few overhead lamps that buzzed and flickered like tired fireflies. And then she saw it. A semi-truck idling near the far end of the lot, its headlights off, a figure pacing nearby. Another figure appeared from the shadows, gesturing toward the truck's back doors. Max let out a sharp bark, the sound tight and urgent. Madison's gut twisted. "Stay with me, boy," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she unholstered her weapon and cracked the door open. Max was out before her, moving low and fast, his body a blur in the dim light. Madison followed, every sense on high alert. As they approached, she heard it. Voices, hurried and hushed, and then a small sound, a child's whimper. Her breath caught. Madison signaled to Max, who froze in place, his eyes locked on the truck. Madison could feel it in her bones. This was it. She took a steadying breath, her mind racing, calculating every angle, every risk. And then, without hesitation, she moved. "Police, hands up!" The scene erupted into chaos, men shouting, scrambling for weapons, the truck's engine revving. Max lunged, taking down the nearest man like a missile. Madison fired a warning shot into the air, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The ground now!" But one man broke for the truck, wrenching the door open. Inside, Madison saw them. 3 kids huddled together, eyes wide with terror. Her heart shattered. "Stay down," she shouted, leveling her gun at the man climbing into the cab. Max was on him in a heartbeat, dragging him out by the arm, the man screaming as he hit the pavement. Madison rushed forward, eyes scanning for threats. But the lot was falling silent, the adrenaline crashing down like a wave. The kids stared at her, trembling, their faces streaked with tears and dirt. "You're safe now," she said softly, lowering her weapon as Max stood guard, his chest heaving, teeth bared in a silent promise that no one would hurt them again. For a long moment, all Madison could hear was the sound of her own breath and the distant hum of the city at night. And as the backup units roared into the lot, tires screeching and radios blaring, she realized one thing. This wasn't just a bust. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The scene at the East End docks was a flurry of lights, movement, and voices crackling over radios. Officers swarmed the lot, cuffing the last of the suspects, securing the truck, and ushering the three kids, shivering, wide-eyed and clinging to each other, into the safety of waiting ambulances. Madison stood back for a moment, her chest tight with a mixture of relief and lingering dread. Max sat at her side, tongue lolling as he panted hard, his body still humming with energy. She looked down at him and exhaled, letting her hand rest on his thick neck. "You did good, buddy. Real good." Max leaned into her touch, tail thumping once against her boot, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the scene like he was still waiting for something to go wrong. Captain Donovan arrived minutes later, stepping out of his unmarked SUV, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His face was set hard, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and the weight of what had just unfolded. "Blake," he called, striding toward her. "Captain," she acknowledged, voice steady, though her pulse was still racing. Donovan's eyes swept the chaos. Officers taping off the area, forensic teams snapping photos, the kids being checked over by paramedics. His gaze landed on the kids and his jaw tightened. "Trafficking," he muttered under his breath, almost like he didn't want to believe it out loud. Madison nodded, her voice low but firm. "It's bigger than we thought. This wasn't just about drugs or guns, it's kids, Captain. They're moving kids." Donovan swore under his breath, a tight string of words that told Madison everything she needed to know about how bad this had just become. "We'll get the feds fully looped. In, DHS, FBI, whoever the hell it takes," he muttered, running a hand through his thinning hair. Then he turned back to Madison, his gaze sharp. "What about Carter? He was part of this, right?" Madison nodded, her stomach twisting. "Yeah, he was the inside man, but I don't think he's the only one. There's more. This operation was too organized, too clean. Someone higher up is pulling the strings." Donovan's expression darkened. "Then we pull the whole damn thread until it unravels." Before Madison could respond, her radio crackled. "Unit 42, report to HQ. We've got a lead. Possible safe. House location tied to Carter. Coordinates sent to your mobile." Madison's heart jolted. A safe house. That could be it. The place where they were keeping the rest of the kids or the command center for the whole operation. Donovan didn't hesitate. "Go. Take Max. We'll send backup, but you'll get there first. Be careful, Blake. This thing's got teeth." Madison gave a sharp nod. "Understood, sir." She glanced at Max, who was already up, eyes gleaming like he knew the fight wasn't over. They were back in the cruiser in seconds, tires squealing as Madison sped down the highway, weaving through the late-night traffic like a woman possessed. The safe house address came through her phone, an old farmhouse on the outskirts of Houston near the bayou, a place that looked innocent enough on the outside, but Madison knew better than to trust appearances. As they sped through the dark Texas night, Madison's thoughts raced. This wasn't just about catching bad guys anymore. This was about stopping a nightmare from swallowing more lives. Max sat rigid in the passenger seat, nose pressed to the cracked window, ears twitching at every sound. Madison felt a surge of gratitude for him, this four-legged partner who had been with her through every step, every close call, every moment when the line between life and death blurred. "You ready for this, Max?" she muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. Max gave a low, rumbling growl in response. Yeah, they were ready. The farmhouse came into view, sitting dark and quiet under a pale sliver of moonlight. Madison killed the headlights a quarter-mile out, coasting in on momentum until they came to a stop behind a line of trees. She killed the engine, heart pounding in her ears, and looked at Max. "Let's be ghosts," she whispered. They slipped, from the car-like shadows moving low through the tall grass, the night air heavy with the scent of damp earth and old wood. Madison scanned the property, 2 vehicles parked near the side porch, lights off. A faint glow from inside the house, 1 window on the ground floor. Max moved beside her, silent and sure, his nose working the air. As they crept closer, Madison heard it. Voices, muffled, but urgent. And then a sound that made her blood run, cold. A child's cry. Her stomach clenched and her grip on the Glock tightened. Max growled low, ears flat, every muscle in his body taut. Madison tapped his side gently, signaling him to stay ready, and moved in closer. She could make out 3 men inside, one pacing, talking on a burner phone, another seated at a table counting cash, and a third standing by a door that looked like it led to a basement. The basement. That's where they were, keeping them. Madison's heart hammered. She took a slow breath, steadying her nerves, then tapped her radio twice. Backup wouldn't be far behind. But if they waited too long, there was no telling what these men might do. She couldn't risk it. "Max," she whispered, and the dog tensed, ready for her signal. Then she moved. "Police! Get down!" she shouted, bursting through the door, with Max surging in beside her. The man at the table scrambled for a gun, but Max was on him in an instant, knocking him flat, teeth bared. Madison's voice roared through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Hands up, now!" The man by the door reached for a switch. Madison fired a warning shot into the ceiling, the blast deafening in the tight space. "I said down." The third man bolted for the back door, but Max leapt, tackling him like a linebacker, teeth snapping inches from his face. The pacing man, the one with the phone, froze, hands raised, eyes wide with fear. Madison cuffed him fast, adrenaline burning through her veins. "Where are they?" she demanded, voice low and dangerous. He stammered, eyes darting to the basement door. Madison's heart twisted. She moved fast, kicking open the door, flashlight cutting a beam into the darkness. There, in a small windowless room, were 4 kids. Dirty, wide-eyed, huddled together. The youngest, maybe 5 years old, whimpered softly, and Madison's throat tightened. "It's okay," she whispered, lowering her weapon. "You're safe now." Max stood at the doorway, growling low, eyes fierce as ever, as if daring anyone else to try and hurt them. Madison knew this wasn't the end. Not yet, but tonight, they'd saved lives. And sometimes, that was enough to keep going. The sun was just beginning to rise over Houston, casting a soft golden glow across the bayou and the battered farmhouse. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of damp grass mixing with the faint traces of gasoline and adrenaline. Madison stood outside, her hands resting on her hips, watching as the last of the kids were loaded into ambulances, safe now, blankets draped over their small shoulders. Max sat by her side, still alert but calmer now, his breath steady, his gaze flicking between the kids and the officers wrapping up the scene. His fur was damp from the dew and his eyes looked tired but proud. Captain Donovan approached, his face etched with exhaustion and something else, a quiet, burning fury. He looked at Madison for a long moment, then gave a tight nod. "You did good, Blake. Real good." Madison let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We did," she corrected softly, resting a hand on Max's back. Donovan's eyes flicked down to the dog, and for a second, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah," he said, "you both did." The farmhouse was being combed over by federal agents now, DHS, FBI, the whole alphabet soup of law enforcement. Carter, bruised and broken from the earlier takedown, was in custody, along with the other men from the warehouse and the docks, and the kids. Madison's chest tightened as she thought about them. How small they'd looked, how scared. But they were safe now. That was what mattered. She walked over to the nearest ambulance, where a little boy with wide brown eyes clutched a juice box in both hands like it was the only solid thing left in the world. His name was Liam. Madison crouched down, offering a gentle smile. "You're a tough little guy," she said. Liam's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the noise of the scene. "Is Max a police dog?" Madison smiled, glancing at Max, who sat close, his tail wagging softly. "Yeah," she said. "He's the best partner I've ever had." Liam reached out a shaky hand and Max leaned forward, gently nudging his nose against the boy's fingers. For a moment, everything felt still, like maybe, just maybe, the world could start to make sense again. Later, back at the precinct, Madison sat at her desk, the case files spread out in front of her. Photos, reports, evidence tags, it was all there. But it felt like just the surface of something deeper, darker. Carter had clammed up during questioning, but the files and phone records they'd recovered painted a picture, a trafficking network that stretched across state lines with ties to gangs, corrupt officials, and dirty money funneling through shell companies. They hadn't just stumbled into a bust. They'd kicked a hornet's nest, and Madison knew they weren't done. Not even close. Max lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws, his eyes following her every move. She could feel the weight of his presence, steady, constant, a silent reminder that they were in this together. Captain Donovan stopped by her desk, a tired but determined look in his eyes. "Blake, you need rest. Go home. We'll keep digging, but you've done more than enough for one night." Madison shook her head. "I'm not leaving this until we know where every kid is. There are more out there, I know it." Donovan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, just don't burn yourself out." He left her there, the files open like an unfinished story, the unanswered questions still hanging in the air. That night, Madison finally went home, the exhaustion hitting her like a truck. The moment she walked through the door, she dropped her keys on the counter, kicked off her boots, and sank onto the couch with Max flopping down beside her. She stared at the ceiling for a long time, the events of the past few days playing in her mind like a movie reel. The fake badge, the chase, the kids, the fear in their eyes. Max let out a soft huff and laid his head in her lap. She ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breath. "You saved them, Max," she whispered. "You did that." He thumped his tail once, a small, tired sound. But it was enough. They had made a difference. The next morning, Madison was back at the precinct, fresh coffee in hand, a new determination in her heart. The work wasn't over. It might never be over. But she wasn't going to stop. As she reviewed the case files, something caught her eye, a phone number scribbled in the margin of one of Carter's maps. It hadn't been logged yet. Her pulse quickened. She looked down at Max, who sat up straight, ears pricked as if he could feel the shift in the air. "Let's see where this leads," she murmured. "Because in this job, you learned one thing real fast. The bad guys didn't stop. So, neither could you. Thank you for following along with this story. We hope you felt the tension, the heart, and the triumph of this journey. Question for you. Have you ever felt that quiet instinct, that gut feeling telling you something wasn't right, and did you trust it? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget, subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more real-life stories of courage, loyalty, and the bond between animals and humans. Until next time, stay safe and trust your instincts.